Hi, I'm Paul Brodie. This is my shop. Welcome. We're talking about eBee today. Last week we made a center stand for eBee. I haven't finished it yet, but it's basically done. What I want to talk about is how the bike got made and when it got made. I started in 2012. It was always made for the NABS show, and NABS was 2013, probably March. And so I was under a deadline. I worked on it basically every day for 90 days, and this is the result. One thing, when I look at electric bikes, there's usually a lot of wiring. So what I wanted to do was to have eBee as clean as possible. So one of the ways I did that was to make a wiring tube. That's this gray tube here. You see all the wires that feed in there? There's wires, cables, all sorts of stuff. So this is clean, and then they all exit here and go up to the handlebars. So I was pretty fussy about making the tube, and on the first version, this is the second version because it had to get restored. We'll talk about that later. I had a 5/8 tube, and it was really hard to get all the wires in. So when I had to redo the bike, this is 3/4, so it's larger. It was a lot easier to fit the tubes. It fit all the cables and the wires in there. When I started making eBee, I had an idea in my mind, but I had a concept in my mind, let's put it that way, but I didn't know exactly what eBee was going to look like. So I made some sketches, and I came up with this shape. You'll see the sketches later when we do the slideshow. And I made this first. I didn't know what it was going to look like, so I made this out of mild steel. Obviously the head tube's way too thin. I wanted to know what it looked like and if I could weld it up. So this is mild steel, and then I made it out of chromoly 4130. One of the hard things to do was to get everything in here. It's called packaging, because there's a width to the motor. You don't want this to be hugely wide because the pedals have to come around. So you can see here, I've got some room, but I don't have a huge amount of room in there. So I spent a lot of time figuring out how to get the bearings in there and all that. I got a jack shaft here too. Do you see how that works? This is the motor, and the motor spins, and it goes down to this sprocket here. This is the jack shaft because the power has to go over to the right side at this point. And then, so the motor is powering the right side sprocket. And it's got a sensor in the bottom bracket. It's called a thon. It's T-H-O-N, that's the bottom bracket. There's a little wire that comes out that goes into the controller, and it senses how much power I put into the left crank. It can't sense the right crank because the right crank is driven by the motor. So I hope that's all making sense to you. The motor, which the output is on the left side, ends up through the jack shaft. It drives the chain on the right, and the left side is sensed. When I started out, I thought I was going to make a full suspension bike. That was the initial drawing, or the sketch I made. And once I started to work with all the motor, the jack shaft, the controller, the battery, the wiring, all that, I realized that there's not really a lot of room, and do I really need a full suspension electric bike for my use? So that's when it became a hardtail, because it never used to have these lumps coming back on the, I call these the side plates. I know some of the viewers are going to ask, well, what's it like to ride? I've ridden it a few times, but there has always been a problem with the electrics, with the computer, with maybe the controller. I've had about 4 or 5 different issues, and it never got resolved. So I'm sorry to say I don't actually ride the bike. It's more like it sits here and it gets looked at, gets to go on YouTube. What happens when I ride it, I have to push so hard to make the motor work. It's like I'm sprinting, and I can only do that for a short time. So the motor isn't kicking in fast enough. So I reset the computer, and then overnight it went back to the old settings. So I'm back to where I started. So one day maybe I'll get that figured out, but for now, it's looking good here. I wanted to use really nice components on eBee, so on the back I got a roll-off 14 speed, and I also went for Hope brakes. So I got, I think I got a 180 on the back and a 203 on the front, so it's got lots of braking power. There's no problem there. eBee is on battery number 2. I'll tell you a bit more about that and I'll show you photos, but eBee was on fire, and the battery burnt, all the wiring burnt, the tires went flat. That's another story which we'll get to. So the battery pack, which sits right here, it didn't used to be like that. It was lithium ion and it sat inside a carbon fiber shell here. So this part is all new here. All the electrics are new. eBee sat apart for 6 years, hanging up in boxes, and then I got around to restoring eBee. And so the color changed as well. It used to be red, now it's a maroon color. It was a custom mix. I had 2 cans of paint and I mixed them together, and I liked the shade, so that's how it got painted. And a lot of the anodizing had to be redone as well, because the fire and the flames really did a number on the anodizing too. On version 1, it was a carbon fiber shell. It was 2 halves, and I got the batteries in fine, but it was so hard to get the wiring in there. So when I did version 2, I was much more conscious of leaving room for wiring. There we go. So I made, got rocks in there and stuff. I made this little, it's almost like a housing, which gets on the side. That's where this plate goes. And that's the controller. It's from Grin Technology, and you can see there's not a lot of extra room here. And then I left a space in the back so that the wires can come out nicely. This is the battery pack, and I got the charging port on the other side, and if you turn the wheel, this just slides out. So easy access. eBee's not a bike to ride if the roads are wet or really kind of damp and dirty, because I did that once and it took a long time to clean. There are so many little parts, and they're all kind of hidden away. Very hard bike to clean. That's one of the downsides, but on the flip side, I think it looks good. So let's go do the slideshow. Here we are. I guess I started earlier on than I thought, on September 14th, 2012. And this is a sketch of what I thought eBee might look like. You can see I've got a shock in there, and it looks like it hinges at the bottom bracket. And this lump here, I guess that would hide the motor and the controller and the battery and everything. So at this point, that's what I thought I might do. And then 3 days later, I changed my mind. I still have I got the rear suspension happening still, but everything is a lot lower now. And I guess I'm thinking that I can put everything in here. I don't think that would work, but that was my thought at the time. I'm starting out. I've got my sketch. I've got a catalog from a local company, which is no longer in existence. These pieces up here, this is just wood. And what I'm trying to do is, I've got a full-scale drawing a little bit. I can see a head tube here faintly. It's in pencil. There's a bottom bracket there, and I guess I've got an axle marked out there. So that's the frame geometry. Now I'm trying to figure out what all the trellis work looks like. And it's a little bit of a takeoff on a Ducati motorcycle. They use a lot of trellis frames, and I kind of like that look. So that was an influence I used, but I did not copy a Ducati frame. Here's the motor I use. It's called a Stoke Monkey motor, and that's where the freewheel goes on. And then this is the axle. The axle has to be held securely. I'm doing some more drawings here. These drawings down here, this is the top view of those two side plates, and I'm figuring out how much space I need in between those plates and to get the jack shaft in there and all that. There was a lot of head scratching going on at that point. What you're looking at here is the plate that holds the left side of the motor on. This here is a piece of stainless steel because you really have to anchor the motor. There's a couple flats on the axle, and so if I make that out of aluminum, I wasn't sure that it would be strong enough for all the torque of the motor. It's a 700 watt motor, so it's basically 1 horsepower. It's not like 50 horsepower, but even so, you want it to be mounted properly. So I've got a piece of aluminum here. As usual, I have no drawing. I just have a piece of paper or cardboard with all the lines and the mounting points on it. I'm starting to work on that engine mount, on the motor mount right here. So I'm starting to drill holes, and I've got the shape roughed out on the bandsaw. Here's the piece of stainless steel that I was talking about. I think I used stainless 304. And this is a boring bar, and I got the cutter, and I moved the cutter along. That's how I made that shape there that fits this piece of stainless. I'm trying to figure out the sprockets and the gearing. Obviously, I had the frame made. I don't have many photos of me making the frame, but you can see here that the frame is made. That's the motor mount that goes over here on top of this. And out of that catalog, I ordered some sprockets. This is just a basic bicycle sprocket with some kind of a bolt pattern in there. And I don't actually end up using it, but it was good for mock-up and me figuring out what the bike's going to look like and how it's going to work. I'm starting to work on the side plates now. So I had a lot of 1/4 inch aluminum, 6061. So I've cut out a shape, and I'm making a hole now for where the motor shafts are going to go through. So this is the right side of the bike now, and you can see I'm still working as if this is where the swing arm's going to mount to down here. And it's another mock-up stage. I went through lots of mock-up, used up lots of plate. I'm on the lathe now, and this is the piece for the left side to hold the motor. And you can see here how I've had to hollow it out because that's where the chain and the sprocket goes. It was a bit of work to figure out how to get all the clearances and get the chain in there. And I think I used a 14 tooth freewheel off of BMX, I think. And that's what it looks like. So it's bolted on with 3 Allen screws there. I haven't countersunk them yet, and you can see how the chain comes out. And also on the 1/4 inch plate, I've also milled that away so that the chain also goes into the plate. This is what my workbench looked like a lot in those days. It was like that for days and weeks while I was trying to figure out the plates. You can see here I've got another plate over here. I'm not using this plate anymore. And this plate here, you can see how the chain came out like that. With this one here, this plate, this is a different version. Now I've got that circular recess, that's for the chain. This is part of my drawings. I guess it's more like a template, and you can see here it says it's the swing arm pivot. So at this point, I'm still thinking that I've got a shock absorber and a swing arm pivot. Didn't work out like that. I think I had to make another one of those mounts that went on the left side. I guess I figured out that the first one didn't quite work out like I wanted. So here am I machining again. I made a lot of chips. And that is the final version. You can see I've recessed quite a bit out. There's quite a bit of metal which got taken away. This is my sketch for the rear dropouts, and I have some plate. This was probably 1/2 inch or 5/8, I can't remember now. So I need to make this piece here out of the plate, and then this piece here, which is the actual dropout, it gets made out of aluminum. I've got the plates, and I'm starting to mill now because I need to relieve some areas. So I've got little small end mill there, looks like about a 3/8 end mill. I've got a right side, I've got a left side, and you can see the basic shape now in the red felt pen, and that's going to match my cardboard template. This is on my full-scale drawing. This is the bottom bracket. This is my tire. There's the bridge tube. This is the bend of the chainstay. And the chainstay I think it was chrome, well, it is chromoly, and I think it's 3/4 of an inch, and maybe a 065 wall, something like that. So it's pretty strong. I'm still working on the side plates. You can see I've got a different shape here, and I wasn't happy with the shape of the plates for a long time. I used up a lot of aluminum. I had a bunch, and basically it all got used up. This is more plates, and I've finally found my shape. I had, in my mind, I could see having the holes farther apart and then having it scooped out, having scoops around there, lots of curves. I like that. More work on the plates. This is where the chain has to run, like in the previous plates. I'm finishing up these parts here. So I did this on the rotary table, that curve around there. I don't have a CNC, everything is manual. Here you can see all the 5 different plates. They're actually numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you can see the evolution I went through from a real simple shape here to a much more complex shape here, but more pleasing to the eye. That's what I would say. I had the shape of the plates, and I had all the mounting holes made, and the holes for the axles and the jack shaft. And now I wanted to make it look a little better. So I took masking tape and I cut out circles. That's what you're seeing there. It's masking tape. And I put it on where I thought the holes should be. And then I marked the middle with a red felt pen. You can see the red felt pen there. And then I took it to the mill, and what these numbers are, these are the XY coordinates, so that I could use a center drill and do all of them. And then I could switch drills, and I'd know exactly where my position is. I wouldn't have to relocate each time. I just went to the XY. That's the final of the 2 plates. So each side is different. The holes are in different places for the lightning, because of where the chain runs and things like that. So it's that was quite an evolution to get to that stage. And my workbench still looks like a bit of a mess. This is my chainstay jig here. This is what I use to build regular frames. That's where the bottom bracket goes. That's the back axle. I think what I've done is I've mocked up the rotor so I'm not even sure what I used there, a piece of cardboard or something, but I just need to know that I got enough space there. So I'm building the rear end now. I've got a roll-off rear hub. This is a roll-off dropout that bolts right in. So I didn't like the angle that it was holding the rear caliper. So this one here is the one that I made, and you can see how I've changed the angle. This angle, this is more of a lay down. It's going to fit the lower seat stays much better. I've got the rear end basically mocked up. I've got the dropouts. Well, no, these are the plates that hold the dropouts, and I've got them tig-tacked in. It's up on my bench. It's a mock-up stage, seeing how the whole thing looks with the frame, the engine plates, and the rear frame. Got the wheel in there. At first I had much larger tires, but didn't handle very well at all. They were hookworm tires, I think, a 2.5. Didn't like how that handled. I got the dropout holders all brazed in there and filed up. That turned out nice. It's looking pretty strong and chunky. And that's what it looks like with the caliper mounted, the rear wheel in there. I do not have the rotor yet. At that point, you can see how the dropout slides back and forth. That's how you get your chain adjustment. There's my wiring diagram. That's how it's all going to work. I'm not an expert on wiring or diagrams or electricity, so this is done by Justin at Grin. there's the psychoanalyst right in the corner. I needed to make the jack shaft, so having a piece of shaft, which is, I think it's a 5/8 bore. So I went to my local bearing supply house and they sold me these two sprockets, which is the right size for a bicycle chain. You can see how heavy they are. They're just huge. So the first step was to mount them on the lathe. This is the smallest sprocket, I think, and I'm machining metal off, and you can see the shine. I've got a carbide tool bit and there's a shine, so it's pretty tough steel. I know the teeth are hardened, but the rest of it was pretty tough as well, not as hard as the teeth. A little bit of work later, there's my sprockets. I've made them a lot narrower. I've thinned them out. I've drilled holes, and they've been nickel plated, electroless nickel plating. I needed to make a mount for the jack shaft, so I found a piece of aluminum. You can see it's had a separate life earlier, a previous life. And so I'm just recycling it rather than heading off to the metal shop and buying a brand new piece of aluminum. And that's what it looks like. It holds the bearing in there, and then there's 3 mounting holes, and it's got a shape to it. This is the bottom bracket that I'll be using. You can see there's the wire that comes out, because inside the bottom bracket is a sensor. It's sensing how much pressure I put on the left side. I had to make an offset middle ring. So I had this old piece of aluminum sitting in the back of my shop, and it had been used for fixtures and all sorts of stuff. And it had, if you look, it's got holes all over the place. But I found a spot right down here that it didn't have any holes in it. So I put it on the bandsaw and I cut it out, and now I had a piece of aluminum. I think it was 5/8 of an inch thick. And this was a fun part of the build. So now I've got it mounted on this is the arbor, and then there's a cap here, an Allen screw. So I'm turning the OD of the sprocket in my lathe. It's thinned down now, and I've drilled some mounting holes, and now I'm drilling it looks like I got an end mill there. I'm milling out what will be the sprocket. I still have to shape all the teeth. I kind of skipped ahead here. This is the big ring I'm making. It's a 52 teeth, and I started out with a piece of 70/75, I believe, and once again I'm milling the arcs for where the chain goes, but I have to do a separate operation to get the shape of the teeth. So it's 3 different operations on a manual mill to get the shape of the teeth. And the sprocket's basically made now. You can see how the teeth are looking fine, and I'm drilling all these big lightning holes in here. That's what it looks like when it's all mounted up. And it's hard to see now. I got the middle ring in behind it. I think the next shot you'll see that. This is output off the motor. That's the freewheel, and then this is the jack shaft, and there's a bearing on each side, and then this chain comes down and drives the right side. That's a mock-up. I've got the forks on it now. I think they're Marzocchi forks, and I used the stand off another show bike. It's made out of plexiglass, and I'm pretty happy with how it's turning out right now. And that's just a detail showing a different view of the side plates and how the rear part of the frame is bolted on. I use 8mm Allen screws for these mounting points. This is a piece of aluminum that I've started to shape. I've got a handlebar stem that I bought off eBay. It's aluminum, and I need to make a cap which has a lower part that hangs down because I need to mount the fairing somehow. Here's the stem. This is the old cap, and this is the new cap. Those are the holes I was talking about, or the piece that hangs down. That's where the fairing is going to mount off. That's what it looks like. It needs to be painted. I put a hole in it to save some weight. I rounded it a bit so that it matches the existing stem somewhat. And those are the 2 holes. Those are 5mm holes. It'll take little Allen screws, and I'll make a mount for that. I got a piece of aluminum tubing here. I got the B logo. What I'm going to do is to make a B for the front. I photocopied the bee, I made it larger, I cut it out, I traced it with my red felt pen, as per usual. Holding it in the mill vise, I've got a 1/4 inch end mill, and I'm making the shape of the bee. I've got the shape mostly cut out, and then I do a little bit of filing, a little bit of sanding and polishing, send it out for anodizing. And while I was making things, I thought, I might as well make my own headset. Everyone else has a Chris King headset, but I'm going to make my own. So these are the pieces. I think those are the 2 bearings, and I got them anodized black, and that's what it looks like. You've got the headset and you've got the bee, and this is the first color of red on the bike. I painted it kind of a bright red, Italian red, you might say. On the front of eBee, I knew that I wanted some kind of a little fairing. I know that most bicycles don't have a little fairing, but this is an e-bike, and there was going to be a computer up on top. So here's the handlebar. You can see the bar there, and this is the cycling computer. And I knew that if I had a fairing, I could hide a bunch of wiring in here, in between the computer and the fairing. And I was going to make the fairing out of carbon fiber. So how I do this, I take aluminum welding rod. This is 1/16 welding rod, and you can bend it really easy with your hands. I've got a little bit of plate on the bottom, which is mounted onto the stem mount that I made, and I use a glue gun. So all that's holding this welding rod together is a glue gun. So if you don't like the shape, it's easy to change. Now it's more filled in, so I'm starting to see the shape much better, and I like the shape. That's the view from the inside. That's the cycle analyst. That's what I'm going to see when I'm riding the bike. Here's the mount. Off of the handlebar stem, I took a couple pieces of tubing, and I've got an insert in here that's got a 5mm thread. So a 5mm Allen holds on these 2, and then there's a cross piece across there, and that mounts on the fairing and the cycle analyst. Over the welding rod, I put masking tape, and then I fiberglass over top of that. So now I have a hard shape. It's a bit of work, and now I have to add some auto body filler and smooth it all out. In fiberglass work, or working with carbon fiber, basically you have to make the shape. That's known as the plug, and then you make the mold. So I've made the plug, it's all painted and waxed, and this is the gel coat that I've sprayed on, and then I can add fiberglass on top of that. This becomes the mold. So it's the plug, the mold, the part. It's kind of three-piece operation. This is the mold. I've tried to take out the plug, and I've had problems. The plug is stuck inside the mold. You can see some of the pieces here, but I have a problem now, because if I'm not careful, I won't have a mold or a plug. But I worked really carefully, and I got out the plug, and I was left with the mold. And there's my part. I've got light reflecting off, so ignore that. This is my carbon fiber fairing. This all has to be cut off. This is the excess that was outside of the mold, so I'll cut all that off, and then that's the final product. I even had decals made that were on a curve. I got the decal maker to pull it down so that when I put it on there on a curved surface, it became level. Now I got to make the battery box. So I knew what size I wanted, so I took some plates and I machined up a couple dowels with threads in them, and that was how high they were going to be. And these plates on the other side, that is the shape, and those two halves would come together because I needed a left and a right. I took some plywood and I built it up, and I'm almost at the height, not quite. A little bit of Bondo, a little bit of sanding. You can see how this one on the right has its shape more defined than the one on the left, because I need to do a bit more sanding there. This is where the battery is going to hang. So this is version 1 of eBee, and you can see I've got the batteries inside. These wires here coming down, that's the outside shape that I'm looking for. I've done a bunch of sanding, so this is the basic shape that I want. Now I have to paint them so that when I make the molds, these plugs won't stick inside the molds. That's the plugs. They're all waxed up. They're all painted. They're very shiny. There's no imperfections in there. So I'm ready to wax that and to spray on the gel coat and make the actual mold now. That's the molds. I've put the fiberglass layers over top. It's about 1/4 inch thick. Those are the molds. They're all mounted on boards. I've cut the tops off. I need to wax them and then make the pieces, make the 2 halves. Here's the carbon fiber cloth that I'm using. It's not pre-preg. I don't use an oven and autoclave and vacuum bagging and all that. This is just laying up like fiberglass, but it's fine for what I want to do. I've started to lay up. You can see how I got the fiberglass cloth in there. I can't do it all in one piece because the bend is too sharp. I need to put pieces around the side as well. It's a little bit of an art learning how to do all that. Those are the pieces. They're all made now. You can see how the fiberglass, it sticks up, and then you have to use a brush and a roller to get all the air bubbles out. If you're not careful, you can make a piece which is strong, but it won't look very good because you got air bubbles and things like that. So they work pretty well, but I didn't leave enough room for the wiring. The batteries went in there fine, but the wiring, there was so much wiring, and you couldn't really shorten up the cords because it'd be too much work with all the ends on them. That's the finished product. It hangs down. That there is the mount. And then this is, see all this? That's all the wires that are going in and out because I got the controller inside there as well. There was not enough space. I should have made this a little bit bigger, but anyway, something happened with the batteries, and I guess that story's coming up right about now. I used eBee for one ride, and it wasn't going real well because the motor was cutting in and out, and by the time I got home, I wasn't getting any help from the motor. So that was my first ride on eBee. So eBee sat for quite a while, maybe a few months, and then I was teaching frame building 101 out at the university. So I thought, oh, I'm going to take eBee out and I'll charge up the battery out there. So I get the bike out there, and it's a 52 volt system, and I didn't know at that point that if the volts go below half that, then something is wrong with the battery and you should not ever charge it up. When I started charging up the battery, it was at 13 volts, and that's always going to be a mystery of how it went from 52 volts down to 13 because I know I never left it on. So I'm charging the battery, and it's been on charge for a few hours. We're outside having lunch, and then suddenly inside the aircraft hangar, which is where the class was, there was a huge commotion, and the aerospace students are running around. They got fire extinguishers, so I went running inside, and eBee was on fire, and there was an orange flame, and it was literally 3 feet wide and 3 feet high, level on top, and it took 3 fire extinguishers to extinguish eBee, because as soon as the fire went out, it started right up again. And it was kind of a sad day because eBee had burnt, and all the cables melted, both tires were flat, lots of smoke damage, and the fire extinguisher, that doesn't help at all. So basically, eBee sat for about 6 years, sat on a shelf, and then I decided I would restore eBee. So I did, and I got all new electrics. I'd like to thank you for watching our videos. I hope you've enjoyed watching eBee in the construction phases many years ago. If you would like to support us, there's a couple links on your phone. If you look for the arrow on your computer, it says show more. If you click on those, You'll find the links below. You can buy us coffee, you can like, you can support us by buying shirts, hoodies, things like that. Thank you very much. Take care. See you next week.